Well, we're finally here. After 3 long years, we have an update to YouTube's favorite iPad, the iPad Mini 7. Which, by the way, I know it's not called the iPad Mini 7. It's the iPad Mini parentheses A17 Pro. But I'm going to call it the iPad Mini 7 because it's easier to say. If you follow Apple rumors, we knew going into this was going to be a spec bump update. But as usual with the spec bump, there's often more there than you might see at first glance. So I'm going to go over 6 big and tiny changes in the iPad Mini 7, and also talk about what I see as the one big problem with the iPad Mini. So the first item is the most obvious, in that we've got some new colors this year. In addition to Space Gray and Starlight, which is still not silver, we have this blue, if you can tell, it's blue and not just gray, and a refreshed purple. Second, and this is probably the tiniest of tiny changes, but I kind of like it. On the back here, where there is the iPad inscription, following the rest of the lineup when it got updated, this now says iPad Mini instead of just iPad. It's stupid, it's pointless, I don't know why they changed it, but I kind of like that they did. 3, we have an updated USB port. So the Mini 6 was the first model to add a modern USB port, and it supported transfers up to 5 gigabits per second. With that Mini 7, the USB port gets updated to support transfers of up to 10 gigabits per second, which will make large transfers up to twice as fast. 4, the True Tone flash on the back has been updated. So if you remember with the iPad Pro from earlier this year, there's a feature that utilizes taking multiple shots with the flash and combining that with AI to get better document scans out of your iPad. That feature also comes to the Mini 7, which is going to be great because one of the biggest uses for the rear camera, which has not been updated, is scanning document. Number 5 would be the biggest change, so big it's in the name. The Mini 7 gets updated to the A17 Pro chip. Now we last saw this in the iPhone 15 Pro, but this isn't the exact same chip. This version only has 5 GPU cores instead of 6 in the 15 Pro. Realistically, you're not going to notice the difference, but this is still a very beefy chip. Compared to the previous model, the CPU is up to 30% faster, and the GPU is up to 25% faster. The chip upgrade also gives us a faster neural engine, and it improves connectivity, upgrading the iPad Mini up to Bluetooth 5.3 and the Wi-Fi up to Wi-Fi 6E. Another benefit of the chip upgrade is additional RAM. The Mini 6 had 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is probably fine for an iPad that's probably mostly used in more consumption-oriented manners. But the Mini 7 gets upgraded to 8 gigs of RAM. Why? It's a very simple answer, and that would be Apple Intelligence. Without any official confirmation from Apple, it seems like 8 gigabytes of RAM is the minimum amount of RAM you need to run Apple's models on device. And so if Apple wanted the iPad Mini to support Apple Intelligence, and it seems like they do want all of their core product lines to support it, then they had to upgrade it to 8 gigabytes of RAM. In addition to that Apple Intelligence support, you're going to see fewer app reloads as you're switching between apps. One benefit I didn't expect is that Apple enabled support for Final Cut Pro on the Mini 7, which to this point had been limited to just M-series iPads. So that's a good start, but there's still some bad news because Apple didn't go all the way. We don't have Stage Manager support, and we don't have full external display support. It's incredibly likely that this chip is performant enough to do it. The last chip was probably performant enough to do this. It's just a choice Apple makes to limit those features to the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, which is unfortunate. Number 6 is support for the Apple Pencil Pro. Now this is good for a few reasons. It helps clean up the Apple Pencil matrix. It's pretty clear that Apple's driving toward every current iPad supporting 2 pencils, the USB-C Apple Pencil and the Apple Pencil Pro, which is now true of the Mini 7. Unfortunately, that means if you have an Apple Pencil 2 lying around, it's not going to work with this, so you're going to have to go out and buy one of the newer models if that's something you're interested in doing. Another benefit is the Mini 7, for the first time, gets support for one of my favorite pencil features, and that's Apple Pencil Hover, which to this point had been limited to the M2 and M4 iPads. We of course also get the other new features from the Pencil Pro, such as Squeeze and Barrel Roll. And the last new feature, which is hard to quantify or prove, is that supposedly the jelly scrolling issue from the Mini 6 has been resolved or reduced on the Mini 7. Now I'm lucky enough that I was one of the few people apparently who never saw it on the Mini 6, but to be fair, I didn't go out of my way to see it either. I didn't want it to be one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it, so just didn't try very hard. The early reviewers are mixed. Some people are saying it's gone, some people are saying it's better, and some people are saying it's exactly the same. If you're interested in buying a Mini 7 and that's an issue that's been holding you back, make sure to get to an Apple store or a Best Buy or wherever and check it out in person and see if you notice it. This isn't a full review. We're going to go over this a little more, but I do want to touch on one negative with the iPad mini, and it relates to that disappointment I mentioned earlier, that there are people who are disappointed that this wasn't a bigger upgrade, that we're not getting an iPad mini Pro that so many people want, that has ProMotion or an OLED display, Stage Manager support, maybe a Magic Keyboard of its own, which would be fine. I'd buy that in a heartbeat, but it kind of points to what I feel like is the biggest issue with the iPad mini, is that it has no competition. Now, this is kind of true of the entire iPad lineup because Apple is still the only company really taking tablets seriously at this point, but it's really true of the iPad mini. Now, there are other tablets that are the size. Amazon has its Fire tablets. I think Lenovo has some smaller tablets they sell, but these tablets are positioned as kids' devices or educational devices or just portable TVs. And to be clear, if you want to use your iPad mini just for that, that's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But with the power that Apple puts in the Mini, with the A17 Pro, with the 8 gigs of RAM, with iPad OS, with this ecosystem of iPad optimized apps, there exist users for whom this could be a primary device or their only primary device. I believe there are users out there who could use this as their only computer. The iPad mini is still the best small tablet that you can buy. So the problem with it having no competition, it lets Apple get away with things. It lets them get away with using this same old LCD display instead of upgrading to something newer like mini LED or OLED. It lets them get away with not supporting ProMotion. It lets them get away with not adding Face ID. Essentially, Apple doesn't have to try very hard with the iPad mini, and it's still the best small tablet you can get. Turns out, when you don't have to try very hard to win, sometimes you don't. Now that sounds negative, but I love the Mini. I love the Mini 7, but I also wouldn't mind if Apple had to try a little bit harder with each update. So that's going to do it for this early look at the iPad Mini A17 Pro, or iPad Mini 7. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. I appreciate you. If you could like the video and subscribe on your way out, that would help me and the channel out a bunch. Make sure to follow me on social media at SlatePad. I'm on Threads and Mastodon. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.